Hello, and welcome to the Planning Your Qualtrics Survey training module. I am Paul Byrne, Research Data Services Librarian at Syracuse University Libraries. What we will cover in this training module is planning and familiarizing yourself with Qualtrics, thinking about your respondents, determining what level of anonymity you will need, your time frame for completing the project, planning your questions, designing the flow of your survey, and building your survey in Qualtrics. Let's talk about Qualtrics in general. First, it is very important that you thoroughly familiarize yourself with what Qualtrics does and how it does it before you start designing your survey. Be sure to watch the introductory videos on the Qualtrics website, as well as the other videos on the topics specific to what you will need to do. You should also create a dummy survey using the various options you think you'll need, just to try them out. You can always delete the survey and its accompanying data later on. You should plan your survey and design your questionnaire before you start entering it into Qualtrics. Don't try to learn Qualtrics as you are building your survey. This would be like learning to drive while you are going to the grocery store. You won't be able to accomplish either task in the best manner possible. Be sure to test your survey several times. Get some of your friends to try it out, and, if at all possible, pilot test your survey with actual respondents. This will be the ultimate confirmation that you have designed and implemented your survey correctly. Let's talk a little bit about your respondents. To whom will your survey be administered? In Qualtrics, you can send your survey to just about anyone you like, as long as they have internet access, or you can use it for a phone survey as well. The only thing it's not really good for is a mail survey. There are three basic types of people who can take your survey. The first are those for whom you have an email address or other information. One thing to consider is if this other information will need to be added to the survey data for analysis later. If you will be sending your survey to specific people, you'll need to create a panel in Qualtrics. The next group is members of a listserv where you send the same anonymous link to everyone on the list. This is kind of a cross between a completely anonymous survey and one sent to specific people, in that you have a specific group of respondents, but do not know who has responded or how they have responded. Finally, you can distribute your survey to anyone by putting an anonymous link on a web page and allowing anyone who wants to respond to your survey. The next question you need to answer is how many complete surveys you need. You also need to determine what constitutes a complete survey. Since not all respondents will answer all questions, you need to decide how many questions they need to answer to be able to call that a complete survey. Remember, some questions are more important than others, so if they don't answer a critical question, then it may not be a usable survey. You also need to decide if you will close the survey once you reach that goal, or continue to collect data until a particular date. And you especially need to decide what to do if you do not get a sufficient number of respondents by a certain date. Will you extend the deadline? Will you try to find additional respondents? Or will you simply use what you have? Your respondents will also expect some level of privacy. This can be in the form of promising confidentiality, where you know how the respondent answered each question and promise that unauthorized persons will not have access to the data, or in the form of anonymity, where even you do not know who has responded or what the respondent's answers were. It is very important that you decide early on what level of anonymity you will need, as this will impact what data are collected. Will you be doing a single administration where you do not need to know who has responded or how they have answered your questions? This is complete anonymity and is rather easy to implement in Qualtrics. Are you doing a longitudinal study in which respondents will get 2 or more surveys that need to be combined? In this instance, it can't be strictly anonymous, only confidential, as you'll need to be able to match records from the first administration to the second to the third, and so on. Will you be conducting a survey in which you will need to ask respondents for contact information for follow-up purposes? You can make this anonymous, but only if you do not need to combine the contact information with their responses. Depending on what kind of anonymity you want, you'll need to use different options when distributing your survey. These options can have a profound effect on what data are collected, so be sure you know exactly what you will end up with before you start. Please see the module on anonymity in Qualtrics for more details on this topic. You also need to pay attention to your time frame for conducting the survey. When does a survey need to start? Qualtrics has options for activating or emailing the survey on specific dates. When does the survey need to end? Qualtrics can also close the survey on specific dates. Will you allow your respondents to complete the survey over several sessions? If so, how many? How long from the time they start will they have to finish? Will you send reminders? How often and when? Let's talk about some options related to question content. Qualtrics allows you to use the answer to one question to provide content for or manipulate the content of following questions. Using this option will require your questions to be in a certain order, which may impact your results. Qualtrics also allows you to create a list of respondents, called a panel, to which you can add extra data which will be included in the survey data file. This extra or embedded data can also be used to provide content to question text and possible responses. By default, Qualtrics numbers the questions Q1, Q2, Q3, and so on. The variables in the resulting data file are also named in this manner. If you have computer code such as SPSS or SAS with specific variable names, then you will want to change the names in Qualtrics to make the output easier to use. See the module on variables and values in Qualtrics for more detail on this. Let's discuss some considerations regarding question order. Will all of your respondents answer all questions, or will some need to skip some questions? Qualtrics makes it easy to accomplish this, but there is more than one way to direct the respondent through the questionnaire, such as using display logic and skip patterns. You need to be familiar with which method to use and when to use them. Do you plan to randomize the order of the questions or the possible responses to a question? Sometimes you would like to display questions in a different order for each respondent to mitigate any order effects. Qualtrics can do this for blocks of questions, individual questions, and for the possible responses to individual questions. Qualtrics can also randomize or even sample a set of images, text, or responses to be displayed to your respondents. You want to be sure that your images or text display properly before you start building in any randomization or sampling, since if you need to change the image, then you'll have to do the randomization or sampling over again. Finally, though it is not strictly related to question order, Qualtrics allows you to restrict how much time a respondent spends on a page, as well as record how much time they do spend. Be aware that this can interact with any randomization or sampling that you do. Now you can begin to design the flow of your survey. First, write out all the questions and answers in a word processor such as Microsoft Word. This will make it much easier to edit and rearrange the questions and responses. If you will need to use specific variable names, use those instead of question numbers. Be sure to see our module on variables and values in Qualtrics. Next, confirm that all your questions and responses are in the proper order. This is, of course, just a starting order if you will be doing any randomization. Make a note of any time restrictions you may need, then go back and indicate where you will need any embedded data. You can just highlight words or phrases, or even use the comments feature to indicate what field the data will come from. Go back and add any instructions for randomizing or sampling blocks or questions or images. Add instructions for skip or display logic. And finally, add instructions to carry forward any responses. Be sure to keep in mind how all of this may interact with any randomization you have previously built in. Now let's talk about building your survey in Qualtrics. First, make sure that you have your panel or embedded data as well as any images or text you need to show your respondents already loaded. You won't be able to randomize or link questions back to any of this information unless it is already in Qualtrics. Next, enter your questions and responses in the same order as you did when you designed the flow. Change variable names and response codes as you enter the questions. And finally, test your work. Take the survey yourself, several times. Have some of your friends try it, and if at all possible, conduct an actual pilot test with real respondents. So in conclusion, planning is the key to the success of your Qualtrics project. Develop your questionnaire and flow before you start building it in Qualtrics. And finally, test, test, test. Make sure your survey works as you expect it to. Thank you. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Our contact information can be found on the web page.